Hello there. Welcome to the Music Ally Weekly Show, episode 2. Here we are 1 minute late, but raring to go. Welcome, everybody. I can see some people are still joining. Welcome one and all. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Joe Sparrow here in Berlin, and I'm joined by this panel of beautiful people you can see around me. So perhaps while we're waiting for everybody to come on in, we can introduce ourselves and go around the group. Well, this week's topic, we're talking about the power of smaller playlists and the other options available on playlists beyond the official ones that are run on various platforms. That was taken from a recent Sandbox issue published by Music Ally. So let's go around the panel, and perhaps you can tell me who you are and briefly what your relationship or experience in work terms is with playlists on various DSPs. Let's start with a regular guest, Hen Heimdahl, Market Development Coordinator for Europe and the UK at CD Baby. Hello, Hen.
Hi. Thank you. Sorry, that title is really long. I feel like I should come up with something more snappy for that.
How long is your business card? Is it
really long? But then my name is really long as well, so it just all works. It looks beautiful. Yeah. So as you mentioned, I work for CD Baby, and my job role is kind of split into two. Half my time I spend doing business development, talking to new clients, going to industry events, organizing all these kind of things. But then also the other half of my time I spend with our priority artists working out release strategy, playlist being a big part of that.
Great, thank you very much. And let's jump to the suave bearded gentleman, Patrick Ross, SVP of Digital Strategy at Music Ally. Hello, Patrick. What's your work experience with playlists?
Well, hey, Joe, thanks very much. I did work for AWOL, if anyone's heard of us or them before, for 10 years. So I was in the distribution game for quite some time. And that goes back to iTunes days all the way up to, obviously, our modern era of Spotify. These days, it tends to be working with our artists. So Music Ally has marketing clients on the likes of Interscope Records to CD Baby to Hollywood Records, and trying to help them understand the best playlist strategy. So actually trying to work on it from the ground up, but also trying to bring in the understanding of being a digital distributor and sitting next to the digital accounts department for you.
Thanks very much. And we're delighted to introduce a very special guest, Chrissie Niestroj, from streaming manager at Warner Music Germany, although I must point out at this stage that her opinions today are hers and not those of her employer. Hi, Chrissie. Thanks for joining us. What is your relationship with streaming on a day-to-day basis?
As my job title says, streaming manager.
Yes.
Pretty much all I do, although I focus on the key account, YouTube, Deezer, and now also TikTok. I've always been interested in how people consume music. So naturally looking into streaming and how people stream, how people use these platforms has always been of key interest to me, whether it was in management or formerly at an indie label, now at a major. I just find it fascinating to see how consumption patterns shift and how we can proactively influence what's happening.
Okay, great. Well, so we've got lots of different levels of conversation to have around playlists. And of course, it would be remiss to move on without introducing Stuart Dredge, Music Ally's editor. Hi, Stu. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, good. How are you?
Excellent, fabulous. Shortly, we will be talking to Stu about some of this week's top news stories. But before then, let me briefly, now everyone I think is here, briefly tell you what Music Ally does. So for a couple of decades, Music Ally has published news and analysis on technology and the impact of the music industry. Music Ally sends daily bulletins, courtesy of Stu, and fortnightly Sandbox reports. As well as running events in New York and London. Music Ally, as Patrick said, works directly with artists, labels, managers, and has recently launched a training service for everybody. And Music Ally, by the way, does offer some complimentary subscriptions to indie label employees, artist managers, and music publishing company employees. So if you think you qualify, drop a message in the chat, which is running. Patrick will be observing the chat and responding to a few things as well. And there is a Q&A button. So as we move forward, if you do have questions, please do ask a question by hitting the Q&A button, and we'll try and respond to them all, either on air like this or by text. Patrick will be furiously typing off screen. So, we have a new feature at the end of the show after we discuss the main feature. Hen is going to introduce Hen's good news of the week. It's also worth pointing out as well that after the show is finished, if you want to watch it back, it will be on YouTube in the next few hours, and there will be a podcast uploaded in the next few days, available on all good podcasting services. So moving on to a section which, unless we come up with a better name, is forever going to be known as Stu's News. Stu,
what happens when someone who's not called Stu does it? That's gonna be a problem.
Well, yeah, you've staked your claim for ownership of this section forever. That's
you can't sack me now.
Classic branding. So Stu's going to talk about a couple of big pieces of news that have happened this week. Of course, Stu is the editor of Music Ally and sends out the daily emails. Now, warning at this stage, which links us directly to the first topic. If Stu suddenly disappears and his internet explodes, it's because he has, 4 children in the house who are all watching Travis Scott on Fortnite. Is that right? Okay. So if Stu disappears, it's because of this first news story, which is Travis Scott in Fortnite. And a lot has happened in 24 hours. What's going on?
Yeah, it's true. So we wrote about this earlier in the week. So Travis Scott, the US rapper, is playing a tour of sorts in Fortnite, the video game, which is basically, it's a pre-recorded event, a performance within the game world, and it's being shown 5 times today and tomorrow to kind of help people in all time zones see it. And so the first one was at midnight UK time overnight, and 12.3 million people showed up, which I think might make it the biggest virtual music gig ever.
I mean, that's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, for what is, someone said to me, a glorified playback event in a way.
It's true, but it was good. I mean, having seen a lot of virtual reality stuff where it's kind of just an artist playing in a studio.
Oh, well, there we go, folks. I think that's the power of Travis Scott immediately. Stu has fallen off the internet. That's remarkable, as the load of teenagers rush to Fortnite to watch Travis Scott. Well, I can actually continue where Stu was about to go with that, which is that, it's the glorified playback, as I called it, was actually more closely integrated into the Fortnite world. And which is what made it so special. And Stu did some analysis and figured out that there are virtual products being sold in Fortnite. Of course, Fortnite is free to play, but you buy stuff in the game. And if you buy all of the Travis Scott, oh, you're back. You're back.
I'm back. Great. I see. I told you it would go wrong.
Incredible. I had just started filling furiously in the gap and was saying that if you buy the virtual items in the game, they're expensive and they make a lot of money, right?
Yeah, my kids were really enraged because they caught me on Fortnite in the daytime yesterday because I was looking at all the prices of what you could buy. So yeah, you can basically buy from the item shop alongside this performance. You can buy a pack with skins, so characters, one based on Travis and one based on his alter ego. You can buy and kind of accessories. You can buy the pickaxe replacement that you kind of hack away at things with. And yeah, if you bought the 2 packs of stuff, it's about $33, just under $35. Which for merch is kind of really interesting. We're going to virtual. This morning I was basically, there's no figures available for who's bought them. So I was doing wild speculation, as you do as a journalist. And if 10% of the people who watched that first performance had bought just the skin of Travis Scott, that would be like 18.5 million of gross revenues from the merch in one go. I mean, that's a random figure picked. 10% is plucked out at the end. No one knows. But yeah, so it's kind of, it's interesting. And just like,
yeah. Well, I would say it's a remarkable example of what can be done in this, in terms of the coronavirus as well, which is, we've got a situation where trying to find income streams, and here's one that people perhaps haven't even thought about. Just to sort of drag the topic a little bit, Fortnite, of course, has an audience of teenagers who are hopefully soon, the music streaming platforms are hoping that they can be persuaded to make monthly payments and transition to streaming services in that way. But they've grown up with a bunch of games where you don't pay for anything and you pay by increments. How do you think that
parents pay for a lot? Actually.
Yeah, right.
I pay. but yes, no, it's true. I mean, there's really interesting perceived value that I think as adults, a lot of us think, I wouldn't pay for a pretend backpack in a game. What's that about? You know, why don't people pay for music? And then you have for a child buying a Travis Scott skin in Fortnite, or buying a skin based on their favorite YouTuber, or just buying something cool. The value is super obvious to them, especially if they're hassling their parents a bit, they haven't got to spend the money.
Yeah.
So it is this kind of this virtual goods economy that maybe a lot of adults still think of as a bit strange and weird. Kids are just growing up with it, and it's perfectly natural that you would spend money on a brand or a person you love on virtual items. And maybe you will still buy a t-shirt, maybe you'll buy tickets, and maybe you'll you wouldn't do the other things. But yeah, there's enormous value to be unlocked here. And I think one of the debates is like, is it just going to be the Travis Scotts? Marshmello did one in Fortnite last year. Like, it's a very limited tier of artists who can do this at this scale. But there is this whole world of mobile games and console games and free-to-play stuff. That there's a whole world to be investigated, I suppose. If you're an artist, where can you do partnerships? Where can you do something interesting and exciting and engaging, where your fans might come in and want to buy the stuff that goes with it, but people who've never heard your music might hear you for the first time and then go and stream you. So it's
actually ties quite nicely with the main topic today of getting onto playlists, but it also drifts us over to your second news story of the week, which is the Spotify artist fundraising, the new developments there, which involves sort of small payments, don't they?
Yeah, so this was announced a few weeks ago and it went live, it was yesterday, when time is really looping in on itself in this pandemic, but sometime in the last 2 days it went live. And yeah, so basically on Spotify as an artist now, you can put a link on your profile to a fundraising thing, and it can either be fundraising for yourself or your crew or your team through one of 3 partners. So PayPal is one of them, a thing called Cash App is another, there's another one. Or you can raise money for charity. And kind of, I think the split is going to be that smaller artists will raise money for themselves as an income, and bigger artists will probably choose a charity. It's one of the ones that Spotify is working with for COVID-19 relief. So I think if you're bigger, people might get like, well, hang on, you don't need money. But if you're smaller, you can. So that's kind of all gone live. And it's the first real step that Spotify's made in direct fan funding. Like, they've done merch and tickets before, and that's part of the platform. But this is the first thing on top of that that's kind of moving towards not quite a tips economy, because it's all linking off platform, but it is a move in that direction.
I mean, one of the interesting things to consider is that on streaming platforms in other countries, for example, in China, the big streaming platforms there make a large double-figure percentage of their income through these tipping and microtransaction functions within streaming apps. So while this is sort of under the guise of helping artists during coronavirus, are they able to take it away afterwards, or is it going to have to stay now?
Well, I mean, can you imagine the moment when Spotify says, oh, well, coronavirus crisis is now, we're going to take this feature out? There'd be an enormous sort of shitstorm, I think, about why take this feature away from artists. Because already the announcement has come within this wider debate about streaming royalties, and particularly for grassroots and middle-class artists. Are streaming royalties too small? And I've seen talks saying this isn't good enough. I've seen another talk saying this is Spotify admitting that their royalties are rubbish and they're doing this. Like, this is within this wider debate of how artists make money from streaming. So I do think they'll find it hard to remove this feature. But I also wonder if this works, if people do want to do this, why couldn't Spotify and other streaming services, why couldn't they be the really powerful base for direct fan funding? Because I think already in this time we're having a lot of conversations about, oh yeah, my artist I love needs help, like needs support. They can't play tours, they can't get this, but I can donate to them in other ways. And so it might be a wonderful thing if streaming could become part of the engine driving that, and reminding us that yes, artists do get royalties from streaming, but there are other ways to support them. So it's all quite sensitive, I think. There's the other things, like it's very sensitive, but I think for Spotify to do, like, people have also said Spotify should have a tips economy on top of it, but that is a big deal and quite a sensitive topic. Not least because direct fan funding is a form of income that cuts out the rights holders, like it's the artist. And so that Spotify doing that is quite sensitive in terms of its rights holder. So it's all very sensitive, but it is really interesting. And I hope there is a bigger conversation to be had rather than just, while coronavirus is raging, here's a way to give artists money. I think maybe there's a bigger story.
Yeah.
Stuart, we had a question from the chat. Does Spotify take a cut from the fundraising?
No, it's just linking out to these platforms. So it's helping promote it. But then I think these different platforms used, so Cash App and that, they'll all have their own cut they take for payment processing, but Spotify isn't taking anything, and it's not processing the payment. It's kind of just pointing you towards the external site.
So this could be a sort of soft introduction of added functionality in terms of paying something or contributing something towards artists in the future. Yeah,
I mean, the other question I have about it is, are you going to find it? So for example, I don't really go to the artist profile pages of artists I love. Like I might go and see someone who I'm just checking out for the first time, but if I like someone, I don't ever really go and visit their profiles. So I don't see their match and ticketing much, for example, already. So one question here is, how is Spotify going to put it in front of you? Will they notify you? Will they ping something up saying, hey, this artist you listened to 4,000 times last year is actually raising money. You can help. So there are a few questions to be answered about how will they put it in front of people? Because that will be the key, I think. Not just that you can fundraise on Spotify, but will your fans actually see it? So I'm really interested to see how that's promoted.
Yeah, fascinating. And to wrap it up, it does sort of link back to what we spoke with Rosie from Tommy Boy last week, who was enthusing about YouTube sort of starting to tie these things together in a little bit more of a coherent way of a sort of community around an artist, and maybe that's what Spotify are pitching towards. Okay, Stu, thank you very much. And
we made it. I didn't get booted off again. That's
incredible. We did a triumph of technology, and I hope the children in your house are enjoying the experience this time.
Do you know the best thing about the Travis Scott stream as well? I think they've cut all the swearing out. So
good.
So every parent is wondering, like, if I let my kid watch Travis Scott, is he going to be saying the words they shouldn't say? But I think it was a radio edit. So it shows they're thinking quite hard about who Fortnite's audience are. So yes, I'm going in now. My kids won't be swearing at me after seeing
Wonderful.
It, hopefully, or not for that reason.
Family-friendly hip-hop is the vision of the future we all were hoping for, I'm sure. Okay, so Stu, thank you very much. Stu's going to leave us now to go and watch Travis Scott, and though he will be contactable via chat, I guess, if we really want to desperately get a message to him. Thank you very much, Stu. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Okay, and Stu has gone. So it's just the four of us left. It's me and Patrick and Hen in London, and of course, Chrissie is also here with me in Berlin. So now, Stu has gone. Next week, just as a quick announcement for next week, we are going to be joined by Jason Joven, Chart Metrics Manager of Content and Insights, and we'll be talking about the impact of coronavirus on streaming. So don't miss this, and we're hoping to have some exclusive data, but to talk about. But let's see. But next week, Jason from Chart Metrics talking about the effect of coronavirus on streaming. But first, speaking of streaming, we're talking about the power of playlists on streaming services. Now, this was from a recent the Music Ally fortnightly report, the Sandbox report number 250, if you want to read it. You can go to musically.com/sandbox. And what this report said was basically that, to summarize, artists have a lot of ambitions around getting on major playlists on streaming services, but there are lots of overlooked smaller playlists that can be incredibly powerful. Focus niche, genre playlists from third-party playlist compilers or from brands or from smaller labels, and they get overlooked, but they can be very powerful marketing tools. So we're going to talk about whether that is the case or not. And I know from speaking to everybody that there are some mixed opinions on this, which is great. So if you reminder, if you have any questions, please do hit the Q&A button and we'll try and answer them all. So I'm going to go around the table, as it were, and sort of from your personal perspective, your working perspective, what is the state of play around streaming playlists and how artists use them to market themselves? And what are the most important things to remember in terms of these official or unofficial playlists? Chrissie, shall we start with you as our very special guest?
Why not?
Yes. Now you do work for a major label, but have worked for indie labels in the past as well. So what's your take on this?
I think that was mentioned in the report as well. There's such a focus on New Music Friday and kind of the major flagship playlists. And while playlists are kind of our strongest tool to drive listenership on streaming services, because the tyranny of choice 10 years on is still very, very real, whether you're talking music streaming or you're talking video on demand, whether that's YouTube user generated or whether that's the Netflixes of this world. So it's kind of a very, very good system, I find, to make sense of content. But I do agree that the key to a strategy on a streaming service is not just hitting the new Music Fridays of this world, or in a lot of cases, it's absolutely the contrary. You shouldn't be aiming for the new Music Fridays of this world, because that's kind of like a willy-nilly collection of the new tracks. And sometimes I'm being a bit cynical with some services who are a bit later to the game, getting these new music playlists with 50 to 100 tracks on a Friday, because sometimes you feel like you're doing that just to please the labels, aren't you? Just to have stuck the track in somewhere. And, you know, I'm not accusing anyone of doing that, because obviously for some people a new music playlist is great, but I find that there's way more value in really well curated genre playlists, for example, or really well curated mood playlists.
When you say value, what exactly do you mean? Because I speak to artists a lot, and they're just desperate to get on the biggest playlist with the biggest name, and I think we can all sort of empathize with that. But what is the additional value for getting onto those other playlists that you mentioned?
Playing devil's advocate here, what do you tell your managed artists when they say, I want to get on the biggest playlists that there are?
Well, I would say something similar to you, what you said, which is that they would look to get in connection with they're looking to connect with people who don't know who they are within them, but know that they should like them as artists. So I would tell them to go that way.
So I think there's a lot of expectation management involved in this, whether it's playing the biggest venues, getting the most Instagram followers, getting so and so many likes. It's not always about the figures that you can actually see. It's more about the stuff that happens in the background and the data that, as copyright owners, we're then privy to, of seeing, okay, how does a track actually perform in this playlist? And with New Music Friday, quite a lot of the time you find that tracks skipped quite highly because it's not really a themed playlist. The only overarching theme there is that it's new tracks. So it's not sorted by genre. And I think what's really important when you're organizing content is the expectation management. So what's going to be in there, and then am I going to just skip through? And with a new music playlist, that's what you do. You skip through and see what you like, but then in return, that means that maybe the track will accrue bad data that might influence its journey through the playlist ecosystem. So it might be you have a New Music Friday placement for 7 days, and then your track doesn't go anywhere and it drops out, and it's another Friday with a lot of new music, and it hasn't stuck. It hasn't transferred into any user libraries. People aren't actively deciding to listen to your track, but it's very much lean back.
Yeah. Thanks, Chrissie.
Drop in an opinion and then a question from the audience to take it back to our lovely panelists. So yeah, I really agree with what Chrissie is saying there. We used to work together actually at AWOL, and there was a big, when playlisting was a few years ago, we really internally debated, should we have our own playlists? Should we spend time building a playlist brand? And what we decided, so I used to run a playlist there called AWOL First. What we decided was that our playlist was going to be rubbish, just because of the fact that it was going to be a distributor playlist. So we were literally going to be picking a bunch of different genres. I tried real hard to make it flow, but it was really hard to actually have it being a good listening playlist. And then what we actually backed off and decided to do is we showcased a playlist of our artists that made it onto Spotify playlists. So the idea being, don't come to us asking us to playlist you on our DSP or our distributor playlist, but rather prove success by actually getting on the big playlist. We'll come and then put you on there. The question, kind of going back to New Music Friday, from Valencia, Spain, hello, is that would we recommend releasing on any other day than Friday, speaking to New Music Friday?
Hen, let's throw that one to you. What do you think?
You know, I see a lot of managers doing a lot of different things, and I don't necessarily think there's any harm in releasing a track on a Wednesday or a Tuesday or a Thursday, if that's what you would prefer. If anything, I think sometimes it can be easy to cut through the noise depending on the size of an artist that you are. Equally, if you're absolutely massive, then releasing on a Tuesday, you're going to get all the attention as well. So no, I don't think you have to release on a Friday.
Tell me why you don't like Mondays. You didn't mention the Monday. Is there any problem with releasing on a Monday, or?
Yeah, how like Corona aside, when you go into work on a Monday morning, how are you feeling?
Well, I'm a perma happy person, Hen. So.
Well, okay. Well, I am not. I'm not necessarily in the mood to discover new music. I think that's
Right.
The Discover Weekly function. I think that's why it's brilliant. It comes on a Monday. It's curated for you. You get it. You can listen to it. But I'm not necessarily in the mood to go out there and discover new music on my own.
Yeah, I understand. And people's lives have that flow, don't they? Now, you were nodding furiously while Chrissie was speaking. What in your perspective, obviously working for CD Baby with lots of different types of artists, but what is your take on maybe these third-party playlists that we're talking about, and their usefulness for different types of artists?
So I just to kind of follow on a little bit from what Chris was saying, I think the number one question that we get as a distributor is, can you get me on a playlist? And the number two question is, can I get on New Music Friday? And for all the reasons that Chrissie mentioned before, I absolutely agree with everything she was saying. And I will often sit and ask that question that she asked when she was doing the devil's advocate. Why? Why do you want that at this point? Because at this point, you don't really have that much, streaming history. You don't have that many fans. You don't I think you need to spend some time building. And I think it's important for you to spend some time getting to understand the kind of lower level landscape, get to know who the curators are, who are the tastemakers, what kind of stuff they're pushing, what's happening, what's bubbling underneath that isn't necessarily kind of out there in the open. So I think third-party playlists are absolutely crucial for independent artists kind of starting to build.
Hen, another question, this is for you, coming into us from the audience, thank you very much, is well, can you either confirm or dispel that DIY artists are limited to pitch to Spotify by their pitch form, as in Spotify for artists, as in there are no opportunities for DIY artists via distribution?
No, absolutely not true at all. All distributors, not all distributors. The vast majority of distributors will have a team that pitches priority releases every single week to all the different platforms, us included. We pitch locally, we pitch all around the world. I saw that Marcella ticked in from Mexico. She's one of our absolute stars in Mexico, pitching there for local artists. So yeah.
Okay. Perhaps to sort of, you started to talk a little bit more there, Hen, about the third-party playlists and the ones that the artists perhaps might not immediately want to, not the big name ones, but are useful. There was a quote from Amélie Bombolo in the Sandbox issue. She's a freelance digital business executive, I think it was described as there, but has worked a lot with streaming. And she said that featuring on other smaller playlists is a good way to work your way up, find your audience, especially if you're a new artist. I just want to talk for a little bit, and then we'll come to you, Chrissie, about this actually, about the idea of artists on the way up pitching and building relationships with these smaller playlists. Now, and if it's the equivalent perhaps of pitching to blogs to get on the Hype Machine charts and doing all these kind of things that have been around for a while now, what is the advantage of these smaller playlists that perhaps have brands elsewhere on the internet? I
think as an artist, you can start building personal relationships with people. And at the end of the day, the person who sat there on the other side of the email, the pitch form, or the social media message is a real person and is a music fan. If they are kind of at their starting point of being a curator and going on their way up, you can build with them, which I think is hugely beneficial for you in the long run. But in terms of the actual playlist placements, I think it's the reverse of what we're talking about with the New Music Fridays. Generally, people will be more engaged with these playlists. There will be lower skip rates. You probably increase your chance of gaining more followers from it. And people that follow niche playlists are there for a reason,
And Chrissie, to bring it to sort of maybe a bigger label perspective, when we're talking about artists working with these niche, but with significant niches, with perhaps huge followings, but niche playlists, we're talking about a slow burn and slow growth. of building audiences and people being aware of the artist, that's not necessarily what you're trying to do, is it? Or what is your advice when you're talking to artists about what they should be doing, for example, with the playlist? Where should they go, or should they be doing something with their own playlists?
I think the most valuable thing you can do as an artist actually is building a following, whether that's online or offline, whether that's on a streaming service, on social media, so on and so forth. Because, and I've said this so many times, a playlist strategy is not a marketing strategy. New Music Friday is not a marketing strategy. You need so much more. Patrick agreeing with me, thanks.
Furiously agreeing, yes.
Yeah, because that's the misconception, that you're going to be successful because you get put on a lot of people's radar via, say, a Spotify New Music Friday. And obviously the key here is discovery. And I think a lot about music discovery. I've whether it's online or offline, it's something that fascinates me, because humans are tribal. So a lot of recommendation actually still happens by word of mouth, by people recommending stuff to you. But then there's obviously the next level of going to trusted curators. So gatekeeping brands, whether it's like the Pitchforks of this world, or labels can be one of them as well. And I think that's why I think what Patrick mentioned is really interesting, because as you will notice, most big labels and some of the more niche genre-based labels have their own playlists. And that's because if you don't get into the service curated playlist, at least you have some kind of featuring somewhere in a playlist. And that's a good way to build up data. So the Topsifys, the Dixters, the Filters of this world, Contour, for example, just mentioning one, or Ministry of Sound. They have their playlists, and obviously for Ministry and Contour, it's really easy because people go to those labels because they know what the output's going to be, and that it's kind of a promise of quality if you get signed to one of these labels.
Yeah, so it's trust, and you think that, I mean, you know, we perhaps sometimes forget this from this sort of standard user experience. When you open a streaming app or whichever service it is, it's a sort of huge void filled with stuff, and people have to sort of stumble the way to playlists, it feels like sometimes. But you think that perhaps the audience are getting more nuanced in their understanding of who to trust and where to find it, and even if it's something like a brand name, they will hook onto it and they will trust that for recommendations. Let's go with Chrissie, and then maybe Patrick.
I'm going to go back to Chrissie. Don't worry. Okay. I won't stay in here long when I come in. Okay. I just wanted to echo what Chrissie was saying about the major owned playlists for artists that we work with that are on major labels. We do find those to actually be powerful. Your Digsters, your Filters, your things along those lines. So I want to second that, but I also want to bring something out of the chat, which we do need to make this point to folks, that when we're talking about third-party playlists and curators, generally we're not talking about paying for it, because the only way I can get on playlists is to go to these sites and pay. Spotify does not like that. We have data that shows that they don't like that from how they've been responding to it. So no, what we are talking about on here, the playlisters we've talked about in Sandbox 250, which are ones you do not pay to get on. And no, we would highly not recommend going to any of these websites that promise you massive playlisting for money that are not distributors. They're just networks. That is not what we're talking about, and not what we're.
So yeah, we're talking about those kind of third-party playlists that maybe are attached to a blog. You know, so you like Gorilla versus Bear on the internet, you're also going to like their playlist because they're going to be playing the playlist in the kind of music you like. And Chrissie, that goes back to what you were saying about trust, and you were saying as well about building up that network of essentially trust and connections, but on a sort of individual level with listeners out there, but also within the industry. And what do you think of the benefits? You know, if you start to feature on a playlist on a streaming platform, it drags the knowledge out to the wider world. Is that something that you strategize about with artists to sort of spread knowledge of them outside of streaming platforms?
Well, I'm always a big fan of a holistic approach there, because you have to figure out on the different levels and in the different areas of marketing strategy. What do you want to do? Where do you want to approach? How much budget do you have? What's your social media profile, so on and so forth. So there's the marketing mix is there for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a mixed bag. But going back to streaming, I think you want to think about what kind of listeners are the most valuable to you. So that's kind of also going to the chart metric feature of the playlist journey. But I think the playlist journey's end should always be that a user either saves your track in the library, or best case, they subscribe to you, because then you end up in their release radar. They get notified all the time, whether that's on YouTube or Apple or Spotify. That's the most valuable to you, because you want people to actually actively come to your music and not just passively listen.
Are playlists a good way of doing that? Getting on playlists, or because surely as an artist, if I have a playlist with 100 tracks on it, there's a few hoops to jump through as a listener to say, oh, I'm aware that now that I like this song, and I'm going to find my phone, I'm going to jump on and find the artist and click on. I mean, that's quite a lot of hoops to jump through, isn't it?
But people consume differently. I think there's people who love playlists, and there's people who hate playlists. There's people who don't listen to curated playlists. There's people who don't like algorithmic playlists because they don't trust the machines, or for whatever reasons. There's people who don't use features like the recommended tracks, release radar, what have you, or recommendations in general, because they think they just know their taste so well, they can navigate towards what they want to listen to. I think it all really depends on the user, and it's just one of the things you have to do, because you have to fight the fight with all tools you have available. And I think you can't completely disregard playlist strategy, but you shouldn't just focus on playlists and nothing else, because there's so many other ways. You can do stream to win campaigns, you can do follow to win campaigns, you can do pre-saves. There's so many other ways, and then it should interlink with your social media strategy, it should interlink with your communications. So it's just part of a bigger picture.
Hen, to bring you back in, thanks, Chrissie. We spoke last week to Rosie from Tommy Boy, and we spoke about the amount of work you have to put in to really get the most out of a YouTube channel. So that not a playlist, but a channel just for you or your label is quite a lot. And what Chrissie was just saying is completely understandable and sounds exactly right. But again, that sounds like a lot of work. And when you're dealing with, let's say, emerging good artists who have the potential to catch the attention of lots and lots and lots of people and grow quickly, do you give them a sort of, and they say, I want to get on a certain playlist, and you help them with that decision, but is there a sort of, not a priority order, but how do you help them prioritize what is the most helpful playlists or features to streaming platforms to help do what the most important thing is for them, which is possibly gaining a following?
The first thing normally I would ask them is to provide me with what they think. Where do they see themselves fitting, and whether they have whether their goals are realistic, and whether they understand kind of the streaming and the playlist market. Because if somebody comes with, they've released one track that hasn't streamed 1,000 times yet, ending up on a New Music Friday is less likely than if you have 10,000 followers or 20,000 followers. And then from then on, I want them to sit down and I want them to think. And then after they come back to me with some information, then at that point we sit down and we look at different platforms and different ideas of how to approach people. And I don't think there's too much magic in this, to be perfectly honest. Like, if you have a good song, I think that's obviously the most important thing here. But I think there's a checklist of things that you need to go through and make sure that that your profile on all these different platforms are optimized, meaning that you have good pictures, you have a good bio, your social links are available so that people can find you. I think you need to spend some time on your artwork to make it look more professional. And there's all these different bits and pieces. And I think it's kind of making sure that the basics are in order. And at that point, start reaching out to people, start locating people and build relationships and try, you know?
So it really is that sort of hard grind. Again, I'm harking back to these sort of the glory days of getting in touch with music blogs and begging them to listen to your song, but it's a similar sort of approach.
Yeah.
What about, I mean, this is a sort of a hybrid kind of playlist, if you like. I've seen artists or spoken to artists who are really, they say, oh, I follow this channel on YouTube, which is owned by a third party. It's a third party channel. And they often have these very long videos, which are compiled with lots of different songs within one video, and you hit play and you stream all these songs. And I hear lots of good songs that way. My audience is exactly like that. And I want to be on one of these videos. Now, it kind of makes sense because you think, oh, if I put my song in that mix, they have 800,000 followers and people will hear my song. But you don't own any of that space, do you? It's sort of the brand, you're injecting yourself into the brand of that playlist. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
If it's a bad thing,
is it a good thing or a bad thing? I guess is a better way of putting
I
it.
think it can be both, can it? Depending on the brand, depending on the brand, depending on the other artists that are featured and how you got there. I think, like reiterating what Patrick was saying, I think you should never, ever, ever, ever pay to get onto
Right.
something like that. And I think a lot of people that do end up paying to be featured in playlist or one of those kind of long form videos often get lumped together and with music where they don't fit, you know, that it's the wrong genre. I was sat online yesterday looking at a lot of different of these types of articles where, you know, a lot of these kind of paid playlists, sorry, I know I'm digressing, but a lot of these playlists you end up are on like soundtracks, you know, Moana soundtrack, and then they've got Notorious B.I.G. there.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I think like spend some time getting to know the brands and see what they're accepting and whether your music actually fits in there and what the requirements are to get on there. Is there somebody you can reach out to, or do you have to pay?
Yeah, Chrissie, you're an advocate of long-term thinking and data. With that example again, because it's a very common thing, especially, you know, as people are using YouTube a lot to have long streams of music playing. People do that, then they're not doing what you're advocating, which is to build their own presence and accrue their own data, which will help them in the future. Would you sort of suggest people steer away from that, or would you say that, well, it's appropriate for a certain time in their career?
I'm totally with Hen, by the way, on those points mentioned before about, you know, getting the basics right, because otherwise you're just tripping up before you start properly. I think the case of all these YouTube playlists is a very interesting one, and you're kind of paying to be on these because what I understand is standard is that you're entering into a revenue share agreement, or they get all your revenue. I think specifically with YouTube, it makes way more sense to build your own presence. It is great to get featured somewhere where you can reach a lot of people, and you might not be able to do that at the start when you have 5 subscribers. But I think YouTube is a platform where you can build your presence really, really well. And it's kind of the social streaming platform that the industry's always wanted. Because there's so many factors and so many levers that you can pull in order to build relationships with your fans. So it should also be seen as a direct-to-fan platform, because you will actually be able to have a conversation with your fans. It's actually about giving and taking. So you have to offer them something to stay and to then positively inform the algorithm that will favor you in future and like coming up in recommendations and so on and so forth. And there's so many things that you can do right on YouTube, and they offer fantastic resources for you to get it right.
Yeah.
So I think I would steer away from that. But to be honest, it's everyone's call to do whatever they think is right with their copyright and with their music.
Thank you. Speaking of which, Patrick, good question in the Q&A.
Yeah, so one thing, first of all, the brains of Music Ally, we call her Isabel, has wanted me to point out the fact that, bear in mind, there's lots of lists with big followers, but small listener counts. So don't be spangled by the fact that they've got lots of followers. You can tell from your Spotify for Artists where your plays are coming from. So the only ones that actually know are the people that have the rights, the copyright holders. Playlisters can't actually see who's playing their playlists, third-party ones anyway. Something to bear in mind. But yeah, we had a question coming into Q&A, and I'm going to put this out to you all. But what are our thoughts on services like Submit Hub? So they're not direct pay to playlist, which is what we're saying don't do. But things like Submit Hub, where you do pay to reach curators. What do we think about that?
Who would like to start on this one? Hen, let's go to you, and maybe Patrick, you have thoughts as well later.
I'm a little bit unsure on this one, to be perfectly honest. What I feel about it, I think from a personal perspective, if I was an independent artist and I had a very limited budget, I'm not sure that's how I would spend my money. I think there's a lot of value in establishing relationships on your own, and I don't think you can do that in the same way when there's an intermediary. So I think spending time getting to know curators would be, I would rather spend my time doing that, and maybe reallocate those funds into other aspects of my campaign.
I would actually like to jump in here as someone who ran a music blog for a long time and spent many hours a day going through emails from artists saying, please listen to my music. I can understand from the blogger's perspective why getting paid a small amount of money to listen and provide constructive feedback is tempting. And I also think from an artist's perspective, that can be incredibly useful as well. But maybe this is a horses for courses thing, and it depends on the point in your career. Patrick, do you have any thoughts? You're a man who has thoughts.
Geez, I really wish I did have something that was, and that's a really good question. So we talk a lot, and do read the sandbox. A lot of people are asking, where can we find a list of verifiable third-party playlisters? Chartmetric did a lot of work helping us with this. We love Chartmetric. They've done a really good job. So please read the article to understand. Things like Submit Hub, to be honest, I'm undecided. I've had people had some success with it. But again, I've also had people waste money and not have success. And I guess to back this whole thing up, if you look at the context of the article, and what Justin Barker, for instance, who's quoted in there, is talking about, is saying, yeah, we go after third-party playlists, but they aim for not one of them, but 80. I think he uses the number 80. So the idea is, think about the value you're actually going to get from this. You'll be able to see as the rights holder where your actual plays come back from. So you got to kind of try it first. I think the thing to zoom out from is we're talking about, and the idea of this article was how you use smaller curation to get into the big playlist. That was the idea behind this. So it's a big, wide landscape. And we're saying of using lots of these strategies of reaching out to people, building relationships. So if money is the way to get to them, to get that attention, maybe, but in reality, I would say try building the relationships first.
Yeah, it goes back to what Chrissie was saying about this holistic approach, looking at the data and owning your own data and looking at it. And I guess, as you said, these smaller playlists, third-party ones, can be a jumping off point for building up this kind of good data and moving forwards in that sense. Perhaps we can sort of start to round it up a little bit. We're sort of coming to the end of our time. It's been very entertaining. But from each of your different perspectives, maybe Hen, you can talk from the perspective of sort of emerging artists or people who are a bit more DIY. Chrissie, we know your background is more label based. What is this sort of, beyond the advice you've given, the easiest way for artists and labels to engage with playlists in a sort of modern, more impactful way for their careers? Chrissie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can just round up really as particularly talking about Spotify. Spotify makes decisions based on the data they accrue on tracks. So I'm not sure, I do get the point of building relationships with third-party curators is valuable, and that gets you seen and gets you heard. I think at the end of the day, you have to figure out how to make your listeners stick.
Right.
And it's the very same on YouTube. And everyone talks about this mysterious algorithm. That's just listenership. It's actually how people and what people consume. And I think we're living in very exciting times where we, for the first time ever, can actually see that. I think we've also seen that people who have a lot of time streaming a lot of music has kind of skewed the picture of consumption a bit. But after all, I'm just a big advocate of saying to artists, invest time in relationships to your consumer, to your fan, because like talking about consumers to artists is a bit dodgy. They probably like to think of them as fans who do it out of the love for them and their oeuvre. And so I think it's like emotion is your currency here, because after all, that's why we're in music. It's about peddling emotion, peddling a feel-good feeling, whatever it might be. So I think building the relationships to your fans, investing time into that, and then you reap the results, whether it's on streaming services or elsewhere.
So that impact on streaming is a reflection of all that hard work that you've done holistically around it, as opposed to the secret to getting it in the first place.
Absolutely, and we still have to put this into perspective of how much money artists actually earn from streaming versus how much money artists actually earn from live, from merchandise, from other kind of stuff. So it's very easy to say, okay, I want to be on a big playlist because it has millions of followers, but will that actually make you any money and pay the bills? Probably not.
Right.
I mean, I think part of this, just to throw in a shameless plug, that Ruben Donson's song "I Don't Want to Be Alone" came out today. That's an artist that we happen to manage at Music Ally, and him quite likes him. And our strategy there, working with our partner CD Baby, and we've done great with our pitching, and we've gotten some new Music Fridays. We've gotten some fresh finds, and they've helped, and these things have been great. But our number one focus has always been, and we do this mirrored across YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. We drive everyone to the artist discography playlist. Whenever he's got a new song out, we go listen to it here, a reverse chronological. So every time we get a new song and we get a new audience, they go into his playlist. And if you take a look, we are building up the, I think it's about half of the people are following him, same number, it's about 500, he's got about 1,000 followers at this point. But we've driven everyone purposefully to whatever platform they choose into the artist's playlist, so that we're building our own following. And we do see when we get these new Music Fridays, and we're very happy when we do. We love them. It's great. But if I'm referring back to one of my favorite articles Music Ally has written about, the dry streams paradox, which if you Google it, it's all over the place. We basically realized that this idea of letting other people own the conversation, why did we get there? I mean, as Chrissie said earlier, New Music Friday is not a marketing strategy. It is a great thing if it helps you, but be prepared for when you don't have those big looks, and be making sure that you're actually hustling the entire time. And our point, as you've said again as well, is not to just build him up a streaming audience. And I know right now with COVID and lockdown, it's not the time, but we want him to be a touring artist. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get enough people in enough cities that we could go, and obviously this is in the future when we can tour again, but that we could actually go play live, and we can get these people to buy merch, and we can get them to be real fans. And that's what we're trying to do, is rise above the noise of all of these artists trying to fight for these really big playlists, and rather just be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more subtle of, hey guys, you like me? Come check me out on my playlist.
And just for clarity for people watching, when you say an artist playlist, it's a playlist that the artist has compiled of songs, that maybe their songs, but also songs that they like as well, which is exactly what fans of that artist want to see, right?
Both. We always recommend that you do one of your discography, rolling backwards, and then definitely have one. Ruben's is called Currently's, because it's what he's currently listening to.
Right.
So use both. Curate to show your other artists, because if artists did that for each other, that would be really helpful. And make sure that you've got a playlist so that when people go, I want to listen to this artist, and if you're in the singles-based game, which a lot of us are, and unable to release an album or haven't built up to that yet, you want to give people a collection of songs, and you don't want to spend all of the time trying to get them to listen to one of your songs. You want them to go in, and you want them to go, oh my God, I'm in a Ruben Donson listening session now. I'm listening to this artist. That's why I went in. I've got his playlist. And I think that's the power.
Well, it's a bit of a curveball question, then I'll move on to you, Hen. What I've sometimes seen with certain artists, maybe catalog artists, a user who is not the artist has created one of these chronological playlists. What would you do in that case? Has accrued a very large following because someone's done it before the artist has. What would you do in that case, where a fan has got there first and made the playlist you want and built up the following that you want as well? I'm not saying there's an answer to this. I'm having been faced with a devil's advocate question earlier, I thought I would throw one back.
But you asked Patrick, right?
I'm asking Patrick. Yes.
Jesus, Patrick was reading the chat because there's like 3 really kind of complicated questions.
Okay, well, we'll move on to those in a second. But
yeah, sorry, say that again, Joe.
what would you do if you're recommending to build this reverse chronological playlist of all an artist's songs? Sometimes, especially with catalog artists, a fan has got there first and built up quite a large following around that playlist.
Oh, that's great. Curate. Yeah. I mean, I think the point that we're trying to make here, cool, and I can answer these questions. Got it.
Right.
The point that we're trying to make here is curation is a positive. But too many people think about curation as in the idea of like to pay to get on a playlist. And as Joe, you pointed out, the man having a blog, and then what we target, for instance, we don't pay for playlist pitching. We work with our distributor to pitch to the DSPs. We pay for PR. And we target blogs that also have playlists. And we would very much like the audience, the curators that have these blogs that have a voice that people follow. We would like to be part of that conversation. And we're very happy to be put in their playlist. So, but if you think about it, the person goes and discovers the song. They go to a blog page, an actual review with thoughts from the artist, with more ideas about the song. So you're actually getting them into this nice experience. And then it sits nicely with other artists that have been curated to fit, and it helps drive discovery, but they're real human beings. Because the other question we got was, what about AI curated playlists? I guess you mean they're algorithmic ones. They're great. Algorithmic is amazing. As Chrissie said, it's all about listenership. So build up listeners. The DSPs will do the work for you with algorithm. So we love AI curated ones as an algorithmic. But yeah, focus on real human curation, and then also make sure that you're getting listeners in there so the algorithms know to serve your content better.
Okay. And Hen, you've been skipped over here, unfortunately, which is very unkind. To wrap it up, do you have a simple answer to the idea of like, how would you tell artists or labels to engage with playlists in a modern way with impact in mind?
I think without repeating everything that we've already said, from what Patrick was saying, I think one of the things that we tend to forget sometimes as an industry is that those artist playlists that he talked about, they're third-party playlists. They're curators. Artists are amazing curators that, they're part of the scene. They're there at the pulse of it, and they understand what's going on within the different genres. So I think, again, without repeating everything that we've said, I think there's a lot of value in forming those relationships within the artist community. I was speaking to my colleague in Mexico yesterday, and she was saying that that's very much the sort of thing that they try to do with emerging artists there, try to get them on other artists' playlists rather than necessarily just focus on the editorial side of things.
Right.
Relationships. Get your basics in order.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks to all 3 of you. And Patrick, I think we've answered we had a lot of questions there, but I think we've answered them all now, haven't we?
I think so, hopefully significantly. There was some that was like, I couldn't quite fit into there. I'm going to do one final question that's coming in the chat, and then I'll shut up and let you close this down. But when I'm saying drive to your own playlist, I'm talking about the artist. Drive to artist-owned playlist as an artist. That's the strategy coming from an artist manager.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, a playlist that an artist has made. Okay. So thank you, Chrissie, Hen, and Patrick for discussing this topic. And perhaps we can all hang around a second, because before we wrap up completely, as the show transitions more to one of those sort of daytime pre-lunch chat shows with some lightweight banter with some celebrity guests, we're introducing a new section this week called This Week in Positive News, brought to us by CD Baby. And fortunately, we have Hen here from CD Baby. Now, for the last however many weeks since coronavirus hit, Stuart Dredge, Music Ally's editor, has been highlighting positive news stories in the music industry in the Daily Mail outs, which you can subscribe to, by the way, at musically.com/subscribe. And he's been sharing positive news stories every day in a time when we need it, particularly in all this gloom. So Hen and the team at CD Baby have picked their favorite of this week. Hen, over to you.
Thank you. Reading Stu's stories have made me really, really happy, and it's so nice that there's something positive to focus on. So I thought, why shouldn't we try to kind of celebrate and elevate some of these ideas here as well? And our pick of the week was an initiative that was written about in the bulletin yesterday called #MyHappySong, which is an initiative created by 3 friends. One, Geordie Meanwell from the mental health charity Life, Callie Bradford from Lovers Music, which is actually a CD Baby record label, and George Godfrey from Radio X. So
Right.
it's about getting artists to record covers of a song that makes them happy, so that we can flood social media profiles and social media feeds with really positive music.
Right.
And also to raise awareness around mental health. So if you're an artist or you're a manager and you want to take part, just get your artist to record and use the hashtag #MyHappySong.
Right, and this is actually interesting because it's one of those, it ties in actually what we've been saying in the whole broadcast, talking about networking, supporting each other as artists, and sharing our knowledge and network and love for music across the board. And this is a good news story. And there's a few of these at the moment. For instance, another big one in the UK-based one is Tim's Twitter listening parties, where Tim Burgess, the singer from UK band The Charlatans, has been running these listening parties where at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, you hit play on a record and people from the band comment along as it's happening and everyone joins in. It's been a huge phenomenon, which is a similar kind of thing. Do you think this sort of, do you think these are kind of things which are sort of temporary and happening because of coronavirus? Or do you think this is a bit of a shift in the way that we as fans and also artists, and this is a question open to anybody, by the way, a shift in the way that fans, artists, and the community, music community at large, are approaching that that complicated, holistic relationship with the public and their music?
I think there's a lot of negative outcomes of the current situation, but I think we're going to come out the other side with a lot of positive things that have happened to us. And I think we're going to be fundamentally changed as people. And I think kindness is definitely going to be one of those things that I hope we're all going to be more kind. I think we are.
Yeah, and supporting it in that kind of sense is good, not just for kindness and happiness, but it's good for artists to support each other in trying times as well, and financially and in terms of awareness, and hopefully driving them back to the streaming platforms where they can listen to even more, right? So good stuff. Thanks, Hen. That is a good news story, and I feel full of glee actually now thinking about that. If you know, Hen is going to report back on one of these every week, but of course she's saying as well that she told me that she's on the lookout for ones that she might have missed. So if you out there in Zoom land have a recommendation of a good news story, they can email you, Hen. And what is your email address, please?
My email is henrietta@cdbaby.com. So maybe we'll include it somewhere.
Pop that in the chat, I think. But it's Henrietta with an E at the end.
Yes.
But we'll put that in the chat, and you can contact Hen for any positive news stories, or if you just want to talk about what CD Baby does, which is just as important, right? So there we are. I'm going to wrap things up. So thank you once again, everybody, for joining us out there. Thank you very much to Chrissie, who is not too far away from me here in Berlin, I think. Thanks for taking the time to come in from the sunshine and joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for
and I hope to have you again sometime to talk about, well, maybe with a focus on your experience in YouTube and YouTube playlists as well. So Patrick and I will have a discussion about ways we can squeeze you in again, as it were. And Hen, wonderful as always to see you. Thanks for joining us. Patrick.
Yeah.
A pleasure, I guess. Thank you for your help answering questions. Thanks to everyone out there. Now, if you liked this panel and you would like to receive the kind of updates that we've been talking about by email every weekday with the latest news from the digital music industry, and you'd like to have a go at receiving and reading some of the fortnightly digital marketing reports, the sandbox issues, which are fantastic, and we've based an entire 45-minute conversation on, or access to all of Music Ally's archive of data, articles and reports, you can go to musically.com/subscribe, and there is a trial subscription that you can subscribe to. Is that right, Patrick? Next, is that right?
Indeed. I've also, for all your subscription needs, basically a lot of job functions are covered. Anthony at musically.com if you've got any questions.
Right now.
In the chat. Yeah. Obviously, but yeah, we want to get this news and information out there, and we are doing our best trying to broadcast it here as well. But yes, please read us. And
please keep an eye out. You've signed up for this Zoom show, but you will get reminder emails each week if you would like to. They will continue to come, and it will tell you about forthcoming Zoom panels here every Friday. And next week, for instance, happy to announce we're joined by Jason from Chartmetrics. He's the manager of content and insights, talking about the impact of coronavirus on streaming.
And his surname is Hoven. It means young in
Hoven.
Spanish. Yeah, just FYI.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jason Hoven. Yes, he'll be talking to us about the impact of coronavirus on streaming data. So one not to miss, because perhaps the topic hasn't been quite so deeply discussed yet so far. And that's it. You can follow Music Ally on Twitter at Music Ally, on Facebook at Music Ally FB. And yes, again, any questions around wanting to use Music Ally services in any way, Anthony at musically.com. It's there in the chat. And that's it. Thank you once again. This will be available on YouTube shortly. It'll be on podcast soon as I edit it. And that's it. Adieu, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, and thank you for joining us. And
thank you.
See you soon.
Thank
Ciao.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.